Well, what's so great about you choosing your mom and her literally being 20 feet away is that we're in this building, which is Native Books. I've known your family for so many years, but I think similar to Pu'uhonua, Native Books has been like a sanctuary or a safe space. I think it's built off of the same ethos of both like creating and like catalyzing change in present day, like the now, to make a difference in the daily lives of people of the Hawaiian community of artists, but with a future vision of changing things and to have things, be better. And so, as Pu'uhonua Society's mission centers on this creating and sustaining a Pu'uhonua, places of sanctuary, I feel like that's also an intergenerational kind of within your family. So what does sanctuary mean to you? Like, and what does that require in practice? I could say it can be an idea, but in order to actually create a sanctuary, it's not just your personal commitment. Um, there's actually energy that goes into maintaining that space. And so, for you, what is that practice, or maybe what is the practice that came from your mom to be thinking about
Yeah,
sanctuary?
I feel like one of the ways that's important to not shift, but maybe expand how we think about pu'uhonua and sanctuary is that yes, they are physical spaces, um, but they're also people, and they're also like the space in your mind.
Mm.
And I'm very grateful for my mother, for my grandmother, for my great grandfather, for those who came before that really um, like we carry that understanding in our bodies, and those spaces are so important now because we are currently living in a very sick society. And so if your society is healthy, then society is the pu'uhonua. But as we kind of find ourselves in increasingly hostile spaces, we ourselves, we in our minds, we in our communities find the need for these pu'uhonua more and more. And I'm grateful that I also come from a lineage that's pretty joyful around the work. I think, previous generations, rightfully so, have had a different level of kaumaha that's been associated. I mean, it's the date of today, right? The fact that we're gathering today, January 17th, 1893, commemorating the illegal overthrow of the Hawaiian Kingdom. If I was alive for that moment, I would probably have a different kind of kaumaha than I carry. But the work now is much more, I think, about that. I am not an American. I am a Hawaiian. He Hawaii'au. So what does that mean? And what am I affirming through my creation and through my doing and through the spaces that I'm in? And so I really am grateful that Pu'uhonua Society as a space and as a mindset gets to kind of hold and support artists and cultural practitioners as they affirm future ways of being and knowing that are not yet realized, but that are very much rooted.
So, I mean, I want to pull on, I think, what you're talking about and go into detail a little bit more, especially around January 17th. And I think like Pu'uhonua, that maybe at one time were necessary and vital in ways, or to address threats that are different potentially than today's. But, did you come into this position to lead Pu'uhonua, or I guess, how has that changed? Because I'm listening to you, and it feels like the way that you hold your kuleana and this job is more than just a job. Like, you embody it in your DNA. And so, what was it though that made you say yes to taking the work? And then maybe how has that actually transformed you over the last few years? Like, for you to be the Emma that's sitting in front of me right now, saying that in the way that you are, did you come in to this position with that?
No. I mean, by necessity, right? I feel like I'm a mother of young children. Like nothing teaches you about your capacity than being a mother of young children, So I think I actually remember very well my sense of time. I'm in a time warp. Everybody. I'm in a time warp. But let's say it was 10 years ago, and I was living in Tonga at the time, and I remember calling my auntie Manu and my mother and telling them, I think I'm gonna spend some time in Aotearoa. Like I think I'm gonna just be there for a while. I remember both of them being like, "What are you doing? Like don't you realize you don't need to be searching for anything? It's already here. There's a need in Hawaii. You're ready. You've been gone long enough. Like you don't need to search. Your purpose is already present." And I really appreciated that because I think actually when we think about Puʻuhonua, oftentimes we think about, you're fleeing from something, a kapua has been broken, you're basically forced there, but we don't often think about, but what does your return look like? Do you just live there for forever? Like, no, you don't. And so there's something that happens in that puʻuhonua that allows you to return back to society. My understanding, which is very minimal, is that rituals were done, is that skills were learned. Oftentimes kahuna, that's where they lived, right? And so something happened where you were transformed. And I really feel like a lot of that transformation comes from a realization that you have a purpose, that your purpose has shifted. And I think when somebody tells you, you have a purpose, here's your purpose, like, come on back, you're like, okay, I can do that. So I think that returning home was a really important thing for me. And then, finding my way to Puʻuhonua society. When I came back home, I didn't go right into that work.
Yeah.
Really, my return was about getting to know Oahu, a place that I thought I knew very well, as an adult, because when I left, I was 18. And so I think, being a keiki and being kind of more opio, like late opio, pre-makua stage, I was interested in learning about place differently. And so that process for me of finding my way to Puʻuhonua wasn't an immediate one. And again, it was somebody else, it was my mom saying, like, we need you.
I mean, I've heard you joke kind of like, well, I'm doing this because my mom asked me to, so I said yes.
It's really like both as simple as that and also obviously more complicated, right? But because of the deep respect I have for my mother and for her work, I understand what it means to be able to continue something. Like momentum is so powerful. I mean, it's already going, And so I have the humility to like, I can try to just keep it going like that. I can try. But I think that somebody has to ask. And maybe if you're, you're evolved enough in your own being, like you answer your own call. But I needed somebody else to tell me, like, we need you. Here's what you need to do.
I mean, that definitely, though, ties into Kuleana and those ideas, though, that like you are asked. And when you're asked, even if you don't feel ready, like they wouldn't ask unless they felt that you were. So, I mean, I appreciate that additional kind of backstory. Like, yes, it's that simple. I was asked to. But you really did have your own journey, and it was a kind of like, I guess like a holistic journey. You were doing lots of other things, and this was a part of it, and then you came to it. And we can talk about, the way that you've really expanded the horizons, I think, for Puʻuhonua society. But first, because we're on this idea of, continuance, and the fact that right outside these doors this morning, there was a whole Onipa'a Peace March. Hawaii were, waving in the wind, but not at the overthrow only, but I think that was just such a pivotal aha and a moment in history where we really had to think about creating safe spaces for expression. And so to me, this ties into where you were talking about return. Like Puʻuhonua is not just a place to be and be safe. You do have to be thinking about, it's for survival and continuance after a rupture. And so, for you, with the current activities and the way that Puʻuhonua is growing, what, for the organization itself, right? Not just symbolically, but for Puʻuhonua as an organization, how do you see its role in being not just a place that is protective of practice, but actually supports this continuance after a rupture?
Yeah, I think Ke Hala, which is our weaving program that you mentioned earlier, is a great example. You know, we're as an organization, sometimes people like crack up because we do very different things. We're kind of at the intersection of traditional cultural practices, contemporary art. We definitely do education, malama aina, archiving, and that kind of frustrates some people. But Ke Hala in particular, I think, is an important program to speak to because that's really how I had my own experience with Puʻuhonua society, and it was through Ke Hala. And you know, in my family's line, my mother was not raised a weaver, my grandmother was not raised a weaver, my great grandmother was, my great great, and those before. And so you have this rupture that's very much tied to colonization. And so many folks who find their way to Puʻuhonua Society through Ke Hala and through our other programs are coming because they were not taught something that they traditionally would have been taught in their family, and they don't know where to go to find it. And so part of what makes us a Puʻuhonua is that we do our best to provide a place that is non-judgmental, that's safe, that's a place where people can try. It's like all experiences are welcome, everybody is needed. And yes, we are rooted in Hawaiian values. So like, let's not forget where we are, but you're in Hawaii, so we need you. But Ke Hala as a program, you know, there's so many folks who come in who've never touched hala, but their grandmother was a weaver, the great grandmother was a weaver, they always wanted to be a weaver. And so really for us, it's about reestablishing the relationship folks have first to the puhala, right? And so oftentimes when you weave now, your experience with weaving is through a kit, a pre-made kit that a kumu gives to you. You could have woven for years, but you've never actually planted or harvested from a puhala.
And actually then taken the process of readying the leaf itself and all of the stages of doing that.
So from the planting to the caring for the tree, then we get into our preparation, right? The harvesting, the removing of the spine, the midrib, the wiping, the cleaning, the softening, like that process is 90% of the time. And so if you come to it just at that tail end, you're missing it. But I'm bringing that up because us finding our way back to our practices in spaces that are safe is really important. But we really, really emphasize that the goal is not for you to continue to take workshops from us for the rest of your life. Like, the goal is for you to learn it well enough, to feel grounded enough, to form relationships, to be changed just as you physically transform what you weave. You too are transformed through your weaving. You take that with you and you go home. And you please do not come back. You go home and you start a Ke Hala in your garage, right? Like, you start to get to know your neighbors. Maybe one of you, maybe you live in an apartment and you don't have access to aina, but somebody you know has a place where you can plant a puhala and you can gather. And so that kind of movement back into our homes is really important, and people have a really hard time with that because we're much more used to, oh, I'm going to sign up for a class,
right?
You know, and so I think that we're really trying to both make the practice, making it ono. Okay, I got to shout out like Paniola Prince and Queen Maile, like talk about our cultural practitioners and our artists. You know, make the pono ono. Like, it has to feel inviting and welcoming and nourishing, because I feel like joy and love, those are the vibrations of this moment. Like, that is what's needed now. But then people need to really like own it, you know?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's so interesting. Like this question's a couple down, but I'm gonna bring it right to the top here because I feel like so many of the practices, even the conversations that we had at Lakuokoa with artisans like feather work, you know, these practices can be like a portal to the past. And we're thinking about lauhala mats and moena, right? They used to have them in every home, and they could be made by a person, like a single person. Whereas now it's kind of many hands make for like little work, or you distribute the work. So in some ways, right, it could maybe be a portal to sadness, right? Where do is reflect on how much change there's been. Like a single person, there's very few people that have the time, right, to make a whole mat. And so we have to do all of these other things. And yet it can also, again, be seen through this lens of joy that we are building a bridge, we're recreating. And so, you know, how does Puʻuhonua, could be for Lauhala, but maybe for many practices, right, really think about and build that bridge from a time where like the way that we practice it though has really changed. And maybe the emotion that people have around that work, and is there, you know, even any grief though that maybe certain expressions of that practice may never return? I don't know. You know, that's at least when I went out to Mokuleia, where you guys were repairing the mats, to see how big those mats are. And like, I don't see them mats like that anywhere these days. So yes, it's like joy because people are fixing it, and some grieving of around like, will we ever be able to practice that way again?
Yeah, I think it's important to like deeply hold that where we start is not where we end, but it's important that we start. Like, don't let the fear of the end like get in the way of the start, you know? But then also we kind of talked about this earlier with work across many generations, because I think if you were to say, I was just in a conversation yesterday about sovereignty and will we see it in our lifetime, and I feel like once you think like on a single lifetime, it's not, that's not the timeline that we're in. And I'm so grateful that our kupuna continue to serve a purpose and a role even beyond their lives, right? Like, we do not market birth and death. Like, those are illusions that I really strongly believe in. We all do, right? So I think there's something there about how we view our work, like even a job, like, oh, I was there for 5 years, like long time, like 5 years, like, you know, like our understanding has just really gotten shorter. So I think one thing is how we think about our work and our life. But I also think there's a lot of humility in it too, of like, I'm gonna marvel at just what the brilliance that we come from, and realize that too is in me, and it's actually more about the systems and the environment that I'm in, and less about my own individual aptitude that like brings me to this point. So yeah, and I appreciated you bringing up grief too, because I think hala is such a perfect.
Yes,
Like,
I mean, it's so interesting. I wasn't, but it
no,
is.
but
I
it
wasn't thinking
is,
about that, but it
because
is.
I mean, even with our hinai, so one of the practices that we support in Kianahala is the weaving of hinai for those who have passed. Sometimes it's for iwi, oftentimes it's for ashes, but we offer that to community if there are people who want to have an opportunity to kind of process the grief, the passing of a loved one, and do it in a collective way or in a cultural way. And so it's interesting to me that you use that word, because I feel like too, as you weave, like that grief is woven into what we do, and it's also transformed. And I've seen people change over the course, you know, of a weave. So grief, yes, grief is present.
Yeah, I mean, I feel, I mean, just to bring it full circle for my, you know, we wove a hinai for my father. And in real time, right, we got his ashes. We came straight home. We were in the room and we started weaving until we were done.
Yeah.
You know, so 6 or 7 at night until about midnight. And I will say, I think this happens with even stringing lei as well, that it is this process of the doing and doing in community where you get to talk about the person, reconnect to joy.
Yeah.
That it really is the process and the physical action of engaging with the material and then with others to this shared purpose that totally helps you process the grief. So it's not even that I don't have grief, but it's like an empowered sadness almost versus like one that I feel either disempowered or that I'm like going to fall apart. It is like almost like the grief itself shows me how much I cared about that, like how important it was to me. And so after physically participating in that, I could really imagine, right, in past times, not having that be a one-off experience. Everyone you knew would have had that experience. And that to me is the power of, I think, what you guys are doing broadly in community when you're doing work like that. So when you were talking, I also thought of your Auntie Manu, and her saying, it's a kako thing, and you were talking about intergenerational. So now that you are this third generation within your family caring for Puʻuhonua society, what feels most alive right now, and maybe what even feels also the most tender and in need of protection, right? Considering, I think, all that we have on the line, so to speak, currently. What do you feel is maybe, at least within your lifetime, something that is like kind of your kuleana to shepherd along?
I haven't spoken yet about my great-grandfather, No Webster Oluli, who alongside Prince Jonah, Kuhio Kalaniano Ole, and many others, started the Ahahui Puʻuhonua na Hawaii. And this was a group that formed a little over 20 years after the overthrow. And it was specifically with the recognition that a lot of Hawaiians at the time were in tenements, we're not on Aina, we're not in their land. And at that moment, it was really a question of, like, will we survive? And the response was, we will if we continue to be on our Aina. And through the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act and other work, they were really able to plant the seed for some of the things that we're still benefiting for currently. But I bring them up because when my grandmother started in 1972, it was called the Young of Heart Workshop and Gallery. And when my mother transitioned into the leadership role, she renamed the organization Puʻuhonua Society. And really in doing so, she linked the work of her mother with the work of her grandfather. And oftentimes in the spaces that I'm in currently, that connection between arts and culture and justice is really not present, or maybe not always explicitly spoken to. And so I feel like one of the things that Puʻuhonua Society is excited to grow into is really pushing artists and cultural practitioners, and then also affirming those who are speaking to injustices, who are creating space to envision futures that don't yet exist, but who are, yes, like, I'm into art for art's sake. Like, I am into that. And also I'm into art for justice sake. And I don't want to shy away from that or to think that those two aren't deeply connected. And so I'm excited to be an organization that can really hold space for folks who are really wanting to envision different ways to affirm different values, or, KNEW new ways, right? Like, it's so interesting how different terminology kind of shapes the way we think. And then there's just these underlying values that have been with us for so long. And it's just another way to say the thing that we've been doing for a very long time. So the continuity of our practices are really important for us to understand, and then also to realize that we are actively creating culture. And so we don't need to fear that it's lost, because it's with us, right? It's through our doing. And you brought that up. There's so much goodness in the doing. And it's fun to be at a time where I still have my mother. I have my children. Like, I have this kind of fullness, some energy still, right? You're like, I'm feeling like, okay, we can do this. And I'm so grateful. You're one of them, right? I don't know if I mentioned this, but you're on our board, has been a board member for a very long time. There's so many really amazing folks that are supporting us, and that are supported by us. And we're able to kind of, like, with time, really create this space that's very generative. And I'm excited. Like, where is it going to be 10 years from now?
Yeah, well, I mean,
20 years from now.
Yeah, where you've brought it, even just in the last, has been 5 years. How long have you?
It's been 3 years.
Okay, wow, that's crazy. But you are speaking to, creating these enabling conditions.
Yes.
Of how once you plant that seed, you've accounted for the sunlight and the rain and all of the other things that's needed to grow it. So I mean, For you, what are those components? And I'm asking with, thinking about people who will be listening to this in ways that they might also be thinking about how to create enabling conditions. Like for you, what are some of the priority actions or the types of areas within the work that you're doing that are like the most important to support? Or how do you see creating enabling conditions in the work that you do on a daily basis?
I mean, I think very kind of concretely, we have, so if we're thinking about supporting artists and cultural practitioners, we offer exhibition space, we offer studio space, we offer a maker space, we offer access to archives, we offer opportunities where people can like get their hands in the soil and not forget that we are more than just a brain. like there's an ability to really be full bodied in our practices. And so I think a lot of our programming, similar to anybody, right? It's like, do you have the space to do the thing that you need to do? We fund direct to artists. Like, we do not live in the frequency of money, and yet, like, it serves a purpose.
Yeah.
And so direct to artist grants, like, do you have the funds to fill your basic needs? Like, that's really important. And then the relationships, do you have spaces where you can create and learn alongside others? We've gotten so good at and so comfortable at consuming alongside others, right? You go to the restaurant, you go to a mall, even if you go on a hike or the beach, like you're taking pictures of yourself the whole time. Like we're so comfortable in that kind of exchange, but it's kind of a muscle that needs to be built, to go in maybe next to a stranger and create something that didn't previously exist, and then also be vulnerable and just like talk stories with one another. Because if money isn't our frequency, then we have to have something else that's our source. And so I really see that connection to Aina as being vital, and that connection to each other. Those, to me, that's like foundational. Like if we don't, I mean, if you don't know our neighbor, it's an issue. It's never too late to go over to your neighbor's house, bring over something. I got a ulu tree, bring over ulu. Like, those just super foundational things are needed at this moment. So we do that.
Yeah.
In some of those ways that I shared.
You do. Is it, and because Puʻuhonua both, right, supports projects that other people propose, but it also kind of has internal visions and things that it wants to do and support. I mean, how do you balance that? And like for you, kind of what is something that you feel is that Puʻuhonua is like really doing well right now, or is maybe even what it's going to continue to do more of?
I mean, it's a balance to be both very receptive to what's happening in real time, and also to remain very focused. And I think, bringing artists and cultural practitioners into conversation with things that are happening politically and societally are very important. And I think something that we have started to do, maybe it's less that we've done it very well, but that I really want to like work that muscle, is like facts alone don't change anything, right? Again, like make the pono ono, like are our artists and cultural practitioners comfortable in spaces, for example, celebrating La Ho'iho'i'ea, you brought up, or La Ku'oko'a or Onipa'a, because when we speak to somebody's heart, mind, body, community, all of these different ways that we need to be activated in order for us to change how we think, artists and cultural practitioners have a really important role in that space. And so I think one of the things that I'm hopeful for is that we'll continue to push conversations to change minds, but then also, like Haunanike Trask, our political Hawaiians will just say our people of Hawaii. Like political also needs to be cultural, and cultural folks also need to be political. And that's a hard place to sit at sometimes, and one that I'm hoping, like I as an individual, and then Puʻuhonua society collectively, and those that we connect with can kind of grow into that, the fullness of those two understandings being held together.
That's really powerful. Do you think it is, you know, and how do you see, I guess, art functioning as this tool for transformation? Because like what you're talking about, different sectors could choose to tackle these issues, right? But if we're thinking about this kind of through the arts and cultural lens, I mean, why do you think it has the impact it does, or maybe why do you a better tool or a more innovative tool, or what is the differentiator, and why do you appreciate the arts perspective or
Yeah.
approach?
Yeah, and that's interesting. Like, would I say it's better? Like, I'm like, I mean, I would say it's needed.
Yeah, that's
And
cool. I mean, what? Yeah. So why is it
right.
needed?
And I just want to offer, when you ask somebody beyond the age of 15, like, can you draw? Do you like art? Like, probably you're going to get a no. So we've mentioned a few times kind of like the building of the muscle, right?
Yeah.
Like, people stop drawing at an early age, and that is an issue. Imagine if we stopped writing at an early age. So I think that that's one of like our core competencies that definitely, like, as a collective, needs to be built up. But in particular, artists see. Like,
Yeah.
art requires sight, and knowing requires sight. And knowing and understanding, like, those, in order to understand, we definitely have to know. And in order to know, we have to see. And so I think, like, who are those who are really seeing things as they are? Like, I'm going to go with the artist.
Yeah, that's great. Do you feel, I would agree, since, I feel like I'm an artist, I would agree. Do you think that there is sufficient, like, art literacy by the broader community? And is that a component of what you feel Puʻuhonua is there to do? We want the artists, and we also want people to appreciate the artists, right? And to continue to give. Do you feel like that is a component that's maybe lacking in terms of, like, artistic or like even media literacy within Lahui, for the next generation of young kids?
Yeah, I guess something that we haven't talked about yet is kind of like these Western art forms, and how oftentimes Hawaiian artists of Hawaii, cultural practitioners, have been systematically excluded from arts institutions, from museums, from these places that have kind of value and hold this Western understanding of art. And so I think there is a lot of shifting that needs to happen there. And I don't blame the individual. I think part of what Puʻuhonua Society does do well, and Aipohaku was a great example of this, which was curated by Drew Kahuaina Broderick, my brother, and Josh Tengan and Noel Kahanu, who is also a board member. They did a series of exhibitions with close to 40 Native Hawaiian artists, contemporary artists, in our University of Hawaii institutions, a place that has, in its history, excluded Native Hawaiians, contemporary artists, but artists in general. But through their exhibition making, they were able to have conversations across the community that led to a petition, that led to the hiring of two tenured, or okay, maybe it's not tenured, but two full-time positions that are teaching Native Hawaiian contemporary art, teaching to the artists of this place. And that's the kind of shifts that I feel like we need to have if people growing up in Hawaii of this place are going to feel like these spaces are for them. Just one more example I want to bring up. We're currently doing right now a show called Eola Mau Hokulea, celebrating 50 years of voyaging. And I think we also, in this contemporary art space, oftentimes the exhibitions and shows are not about things that we value or care for. And oftentimes that's because the curators don't value
Right.
there's a mismatch. Who's curating the show, the artists that are being selected, and the topic that's being discussed. And so I really feel like Puʻuhonua Society is bringing forth the excellence of our Native Hawaiian and Hawaii-based curators. And in doing so, the artists that they bring in and the topics that they engage with are actually ones of interest. And so then it's our job to convince people like, hey, this is a space for you. And that takes time, and a lot of shifts on many levels. But again, I'm excited to see where we'll be, with sustained support. And much of our support for Puʻuhonua society comes from the continent, which is an interesting thing. Maybe that's
Well,
not.
no, I was gonna no. I
like-
feel like, well, in my brain, I was thinking, well, considering it's January 17th and we're talking about the colonizer and Hawaii, I was actually going to pull on, but what is the relationship in this art space between foreign philanthropy or external philanthropy and Hawaii philanthropy? Both, I guess, from just a monetary standpoint of having enough resources or more resources coming into Hawaii, but also because it is that dominant framework of art. And so, yeah, what do you see as the relationship between the art and art philanthropy spaces outside of Hawaii, the role for Hawaii? And I'm, interested for you to give a space for you to talk about how it does support Puʻuhonua society, because at least when I've experienced it doesn't feel to me that the organization has had to pull back on any of its principles or vision. So I think you've been really successful in that. But I mean, behind the scenes, is that the case? Does it I guess, and also, is there some tension around that in terms of achieving what you have? Has it been seamless because you found the right people, or have you had to have some hard conversations?
I mean, I think just like there's a huge diversity within the arts and culture organizations, there's a huge diversity within funders for arts and culture organizations. But one of the things that I've felt is that the clearer we are, then the clearer funders or any form of those wanting to support the work of Puʻuhonua society, the clearer they can be with us, right? Like clarity begets clarity. So, you can fund us or you cannot fund us, the work will continue.
Right.
And so we've, I think, done well in the sense that I think in some ways we're past the point of wanting to persuade those that maybe aren't willing to be persuaded and are more interested in those who are just looking for an avenue to support. And we definitely are pro ally. There's come on, come on, I mean, that's my view, and that's my ohana's view, is that there's so much work to be done. And so I'm not necessarily interested in fighting over what is the right way to do the work. I'm more interested in, do you want to support the work being done? And then if you do, it's actually like a leveling of the playing field, because this is what we're willing to give you versus a grantor or funder saying, this is what you have to do for us.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And it's a nice thing to be at a place, even though it's been just 3 years, I've learned a lot. And I've learned that, just because a grant is open doesn't mean you have to apply for it, And so I think that kind of clarity is very helpful. And there's plenty of people that I've found that really do find resonance with the work that we're doing. And I'm sticking in those places, and we'll see, if that can sustain. But I've found it to be a very affirming experience, actually, because I think a lot of folks are moving towards that kind of multi-year, unrestricted funding. Of course, there's a lot of folks who are not, but there's a lot of folks who are moving towards it. And for me, that allows our organization to have the freedom and the flexibility to be responsive to real-time needs. We talked about that earlier, right? How can you be responsive to community if you have a grant proposal that was written 5 years ago that you're still being held accountable to the T?
Right.
It doesn't work.
Well, in fact, one of the things that, in terms of going with the flow, that also I think really merges art and politics. It's not just an artist with a painting that's about politics, right, or making a statement, but is the la ho'iho'ia, and actually joining in where half of the park, right, is their kind of the annual la ho'i event, but then having the other half of the park literally be art installations. And so do you see that that's also maybe something that is going to happen, right, more often, that it is an actual merging of, well, it's a both and, right? It's many times that art was also an expression of, like, political resistance, but it's happening at that event, and it was broad, and it was also like an external funder that really supported us joining in. So, like, what was that experience like? Well, and I guess, and the part that I wanted to pull on too is that it was a real time need, and it was something that just emerged. It wasn't out of planning. It was that they happened to pick the day, the same day as La Hoi, and so it was like something that you were able to take advantage of in real time. If you could just speak to that whole experience a little bit.
Yeah, so Naia is talking about a project that was supported through an initiative called One Nation, One Project, which was hilarious. Arts for Everybody. And it was looking at the connection between community arts participation and social cohesion and well-being. And they were really looking across the nation at the role that artists and cultural practitioners play in basically the health of our people. But they picked this date that happened to be, this was 2 years ago now, the day that La Ho'iho'i'ea would be celebrated at Thomas Square. And we're grateful that we were able to kāko'o the work that's been started and continued for many years now. And I think, one thing that's nice about it is that a holiday happens every year, right? And I think one of the things that we really value is the ability to do something again and again and again. There's this kind of novelty that we enjoy. A lot of people enjoy now, like, oh, I did it once, but did you do it again? And so I'm grateful that we get to work alongside just some amazing leaders who have been doing that work, and that they've kind of allowed us to bring a different energy or an additional energy that helps to kind of like round out the experience, and also allows us to educate and maybe in some ways allow folks who wouldn't necessarily feel comfortable in the space typically to join. And I think Puʻuhonua society is wanting to kind of open in some ways these spaces, because we do recognize that we need more people caring about Hawaiian values, caring about Hawaiian history, caring about Hawaiian culture. And if we define only on our koko, then we've limited ourselves. And that's where it's losing game. And so I think that, La Ho'iho'i'ea was such a great opportunity for us to really be present for somebody else's thing, right? Like, that's the other thing. It's like, sometimes we just get so caught up in we're doing this thing that we don't show up for other people's things. And I think Puʻuhonua Society as an organization also wants to be somebody that like does show up and does invest and does kind of add to the work of others. And so I see La Hoi as one of those kind of ways that we're going to do for many years, as long as they'll continue to have us.
Yeah, I thought just the way that has played out in the last 2 years has been really beautiful. And I think things that it has showcased for people, bringing together things that they may not have thought of in the same space, like breakdancing.
Yeah.
And
shout out 808 Breakers.
That's right. It was very, very cool.
Yeah.
So for you, what are some of the things that just in the near term, right, just our one lifetime, but even shorter than that, what feels alive for you? What are you looking forward to kind of like doubling down on in this near term?
Yeah. Oh, so many things. So one of the things that has come from Puʻuhonua Society is that many folks have never heard of us. We're an organization that's 53 years old now, and yet the vast majority of those in Hawaii have never heard our name. And that's for many reasons. But one is because we've operated through very discrete programs. programs. So maybe you're familiar with Aupuni Space, maybe you've taken a workshop at Kipuka, maybe you wove with Kianahala, maybe you're familiar with Ho'omauna Makuoka'aina, our community archiving, but the understanding that those things are all connected. And I think for a while, you know, those programs are amazing in and of themselves. But one of the things that I'm recognizing, and it's not a branding thing actually, which is funny because it has nothing to do with the branding. It's the recognition that those who are weaving, those who are creating contemporary art, those who are interested in archiving actually need to be in conversation with each other. And they need to realize that there are very important differences and also similarities in the work that they do. And I think by just helping people to understand the fullness of Puʻuhonua society will help people to understand like the just amazing excellence of Hawaii. So I think both for our own understanding, I hope that we'll kind of cross some of those contemporary art, you know, cultural practice, archiving, like we'll cross some of those boundaries. But I also think as we speak to people outside of Hawaii, you know, them understanding that those things are all deeply connected is important for our own survival and thriving here, because we cannot just stay here, right? Like there's a universality to the work that we do. And I really have to credit Indrajit Gunesekara and Auntie Manu, who are our volunteer co-directors of Niu Now. And this is always my favorite whenever anybody's like, so what do you guys do? Like, you guys plant coconut groves? Like, I do not get it, you know? But then the second they come and they see the diversity of our kumuniu and the realization that if we don't know what the function of that particular kumuniu was, whether it was for its base for pahu, whether it was for its lau for weaving, whether it was for the shell for the apu for our cup, right? If we don't, the cordage was the fibers used for cordage. If we don't know our trees, then we don't have a relationship, which then means we definitely aren't creating things. And so I just like Niu Now for me is such an important program because it speaks to this this deep Hawaii knowing that of course connection to Aina, of course Aloha Aina is art, is a cultural like I'm just like but that's when I realized that we need to figure out how to verbalize and communicate the things that feel like so obvious, because there's many places where they are not so obvious. So that's one of the things that I'm excited to like get into in these next
well, I feel like that
years.
really is a great place to kind of bring this conversation like full circle, because my earlier conversation with Kaimi and through a hula lens, you know, he was talking about, you know, he loves these chants that are about prophecy, but he's looking forward to the day where we are writing contemporary prophecy chants. And so I feel, right, like no pressure. I'm not saying that you have to prophesize, but with that energy, right, of like a prophecy, of a vision for the future, in your role as executive director of this nonprofit that is, you know, has this vision of a sanctuary and what can come from a sanctuary when you care for something and building that bridge. Just what is that far off vision of Hawaii impacted by like the arts?
My daughter, Aima, aka Kapiko, would have multiple puhala that she can see and care for from her bedroom window. Her family would all know how to care for it. She would wake up and the first thing she would put her feet on would be a moena, a mat. She would know the oli for gathering. She would know the oli for harvesting. She would know how to give gratitude. She would be able to weave whatever she wanted to weave for whatever purpose she had, right? The form and the function. And of course, it's going to be beautiful, right? Because it has to be beautiful. But I feel like it's so simple, right? But then it's not, because if everybody had access to a puhala, then they have access to Aina. And if you have the ability to weave, then you have time to breathe. And if you're saying oli, then you probably know some language, right? So to me, it's as simple as that. It's that she's not going to a workshop. it's in her. That's how her descendants are learning. Our descendants are learning. There's an ease. It's just like, this is just something I do. This is just me living my life.
Well, I look forward then, like, like to her 18th birthday or whatever, where there's just lauhala that she's woven. Like I can picture myself
Mm.
there. So I really appreciate you creating that vision, and I'm gonna hold that for Kapiko, but for
Uh,
all keiki in Hawaii. Thank you for talking today.
Thanks for having me.